morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining and being here. What an incredible event we have. That might have been the best intro I've ever had for one of these things, so that was incredible. But if you didn't catch it, my name is Troy Cogburn, Chief Technology Evangelist at Vation Ventures. Really love the theme of this conference of igniting innovation because I've spent the past decade looking at how to help companies and organizations innovate within their own companies. And real quick before I dive in, I just wanted to do a quick poll around the room. In the last 3 years, raise your hand if you've had an innovation initiative at your organization. I'm seeing a handful of hands. Keep those hands up if that initiative delivered on its promise. And then keep your hand up if that initiative is still running today. I see some hands. We have some real innovators in the house. But as you probably noticed, there's a lot of hands that went down, and that's okay. We see that 95% of innovation initiatives fail. That's because innovation's hard. And throughout my talk today, I'll talk a little bit about what even is innovation and how do we define it and how do we make it a little bit more pragmatic. And then how do we leverage artificial intelligence and build a business case around it to innovate through artificial intelligence. And so really just to look back at history and how we got to where we're at today, we've seen a lot of different innovation cycles. We've seen a lot of change throughout the industry. We've seen the Industrial Revolution to the Transportation Revolution to the information era, and now we're entering the artificial intelligence era. So a lot of change has happened over the past couple of centuries. But what's really interesting to us at Vation is not just the change that's happening, but it's the actual pace of change. And so if you look at the Industrial Revolution, it was roughly 80 years that it took to really meet its full potential. But if you look at where we're at in the information era, around 30 years, and we're anticipating that artificial intelligence will be roughly 10 years. I think there's no accurate prediction, but folks are thinking that we will have what they call AGI, artificial general intelligence, in the next decade or so. And so the big thing for us when we look at this is there's less and less time to catch up. And so we have to be a little bit more proactive about innovation. And so if you think about innovation and technology revolutions accelerating over time, the gap between status quo and where the innovators are growing bigger and bigger. And this is really the challenge. And for a lot of the organizations that I talk to, it's hard to look through the dash and look forward. When you've got so much problems of yesterday, problems of today, it really becomes a challenge of getting out of your own way to innovate. And so one of the things that I like to do is really just to find how can you even innovate within your organization. And there's a really good way to really articulate this. And if you look at the slide that I have up on the screen, there's really two axes. You have technology change, and then you have business change. And then the more technology change you have, the more you can innovate within your organization. And the more business change you have, and you combine those together, you get the radical innovations that really disrupt markets. I think each one of these is very important, and I'm going to give an example of each one of these. But you can think about incremental change as low tech change, low business change. And I think all of these are relevant for organizations today. And if you look at maybe an example of what incremental innovation looks like, I find this very funny that I have this slide after Apple just announced the so-called thinnest phone that they've ever made with a bulky camera. But incremental innovation is very important. Not much has changed since the iPhone was released. It was a huge disruption. We had the smartphone. It was kind of the first of its kind, really changed the way that we communicated with folks and got information. But over time, really, we've added more cameras. It's gotten a little bigger. The screens are maybe 120 hertz refresh, more storage. Not a whole lot of change, but those innovations were important to keep customers getting the latest and greatest tech. It's not revolutionary, but it's important to incrementally innovate to keep them around and in business. But if we think about something that's a little bit more disruptive, and Not necessarily technology, but electricity-enabled technology. And if you think back to the automotive industry and Henry Ford and really the manufacturing line, what he did was he was able to reduce his operational efficiency or create operational efficiencies to make a car from 12 hours to 93 minutes, a dramatic change in the amount of time that it took for them to make a car. They were able to increase their amount of production and then even reduce the cost. And these numbers seem very small because it is a very long time since now, but the $850 to $290 for a car was quite dramatic. The $850 was a luxury item for folks, and so only really high-class folks could afford a car. But through the innovations of moving from a steam engine to electricity module factories, leveraging electricity, he was able to open up the market so everyone could afford a car. Now, he wasn't making electric cars at the time, but it was still very disruptive to their internal operations. And then from a business perspective, business models change over time, and we've recently seen the move towards the subscription economy, the as-a-service economy, and this has dramatically changed industries too. And it is technology-backed, but really it is almost doing the same use case as what Henry Ford did, which is Adobe, one of their biggest moves that they've made was going to the Creative Cloud rather than shipping perpetual licenses and CDs. So rather than owning the software, you're renting the software through their subscription service, had dramatically changed their business. So this simple shift in a business model increased their revenue by around 3x, almost a 20x stock price change, and an incredible market valuation change, all by just changing the way the business model worked. And what that did was enabled access to other folks to really leverage their software without having the upfront capital expenditure. And this probably limited the amount of pirating that went on as well. So folks that had Photoshop through some sort of pirating software, they didn't have to do that anymore. And if we look at the radical innovations, I think these are about 10% of innovation. They're very rare, and very few people are actually working on them. But I really equate those to the paradigm shifts that we've seen, from personal computers to the internet, smartphones with iPhones and Androids, to cloud, and now artificial intelligence. And so there are folks probably in the room that are helping contribute towards these revolutions, but they're very rare. And I think for everyone in this ecosystem, it's more about how do we leverage these paradigm shifts rather than be a part of building them. And one of the funny things that I find with each one of these revolutions is you get a lot of hype around it. In the room, has anyone seen the show Silicon Valley? I'm seeing some hands raised. They have this TechCrunch Disrupt conference, and they have all these vendors going on stage, and they're talking about how they're social, local, mobile, because at the time it was the social paradigm shift. And for a lot of times, these apps didn't have to be social, local, mobile. It was just getting on board the hype. And so it was like a social, local, mobile database or a social, local, mobile application for fitness. And these were just features in search of a problem. And we're seeing a lot of that in AI today. I'm sure every vendor conversation that you're having, there's some sort of AI. And so how do we really cut through the hype? How do we figure out where the real value is? I'll talk about a little bit about that once I get to some later slides, but I think it's important for us to understand when we're following these waves, is AI actually going to have an impact, or is this just a buzzword where it's a solution in search of a problem? But I think for the ones that are actually changing industries, we have seen a lot of success over other paradigm shifts. So if you think about moving from the physical era to the information digital era, we've seen the disruption of taxis, Blockbuster, hotels, and even retail e-commerce. So we've seen folks like Uber, Netflix, and Airbnb really disrupt these industries. A lot of that came in the combination of that technology change, enabling through mobile apps, but also the business model change through subscription. We're currently transitioning to the digital era, from the digital era to AI, and we don't really know what that future looks like yet. We have seen some examples. If you travel to Arizona or other places, you have Waymo, autonomous rental cars. Amazon has optimized their factories with robots. But for a lot of industries, we don't know what this looks like yet. And so my challenge for everyone here is are you in a place to be the leader in the AI area for your market? And what does that look like? And it's not going to happen overnight. But the other thing to consider is, how does that change your business model? So when cloud came around, we had the SaaS economy, but what does the AI economy look like? I don't think it's been solidified yet, but from what I'm hearing from a lot of folks, it's more about outcome-based pricing, consumption-based pricing. So enabling even further options for anyone to get into the market. So really low price, pay by outcomes. And if you don't get the outcomes you achieve, then you don't actually have to pay for what you're looking at. And so while this sounds great, I think it creates very huge complexities for a lot of the sponsors in the room, where how do we even set up outcome-based pricing? But this could be the differentiator for folks that are getting low cost of entry, proving value day one, versus having to do per user, per seat type of subscriptions. And so when we're looking at innovation, everyone should think about, are you doing a business change, high business change? Is it very small, incremental? How much technology change? And it doesn't have to be artificial intelligence. It could be just as simply more cameras on a phone, right? And what kind of innovations are you doing in your organization? But if we look at where folks are innovating today, artificial intelligence, I have a kind of a current state of artificial intelligence. I've got a lot more information that I'm going to present on the slide today. But really, where are we at? At Ovation Ventures, we have a network of roughly 2,000 technology executives, and every year we try and learn their priorities of where their focuses are. And so if we look at the current state of artificial intelligence, we do this survey and we ask, what is the most impactful technology to you over the next 3 years? Until last year, artificial intelligence wasn't even on the radar. It was things like cloud, cybersecurity, automation. And now AI is the clear leader that's going to have impact for these organizations, or so the technology executives believe. And the interesting thing to me is, while it's going to have the most impact, where we're at today in terms of maturity, is it's still really, really early. Looking at what we found is roughly 55% of organizations haven't deployed any sort of AI. And I'm going to be a little bit more clear, specifically generative AI, because some folks have some machine learning models and other things like that. But in terms of generative AI, we're seeing roughly 55% with no deployment. They're still aware there's value. They're planning, trying to figure out how they can get value out of it. And we do see some active implementations, and we have some folks that have some real advanced deployments. But another study from MIT just showed that 95% of generative AI projects are failing in organizations, very closely to that innovation stat, right? So it's still early. There's still a market to be had. And if we look at, just for example, for specific industries, this is a manufacturing example. A lot of these use cases are very unique to industry. And so there are some horizontal use cases that we're seeing, but we're seeing things for like manufacturing is supply chain optimization, forecasting, process automation. And so from a customer perspective, everyone's unique and they're trying to solve their own challenges, and it's very, very early, and it's up to us in the room to really try and figure out, how do we find value of this technology revolution? If we look on the flip side, looking at the money really paints a good picture for me. We work with a lot of venture capitalists that fund probably a lot of the vendors that are in the room today and all the up and coming startups. And if we look at where the money's going over the past 5 or so years, the density has really changed. And it paints a really interesting story. So if you look at 2020, about 14% of private investments were going into artificial intelligence. And then if you fast forward to Q1 this year, about 71% of investments are going towards artificial intelligence. And that creates a big gap, right? We just said most folks aren't even really deploying AI. A lot of AI projects are failing, yet billions of dollars are actually going into the market. And to give you another kind of view of this, if you look at generative AI investment over time, it's hockey stick-like growth. We saw roughly $50 billion go into generative AI last year. We're probably going to see about $100 billion go into generative AI this year. And still we're not finding any value from the enterprise perspective. And if you even look at tech in general, so enterprise software, who are the companies that have made the most money? It's all these AI companies that are making the most money today. And for folks in the enterprise, a lot of these they're not even leveraging. And so to me, this is this foundational model race. It's almost like a gold rush where you've got OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, all trying to be the AI front runners. But to me, you don't always have to be the ones creating those revolutions to even find value as well. And so if we equate this to the actual gold rush that happened, where folks were trying to go out, strike gold, get rich, what I took away from that and what a lot of others is the folks that got rich weren't even the ones mining for gold. They were the folks like Levi's that were creating durable clothes that let them stay out there and mine longer. It was folks like Samuel Brennan who was creating the pans, the picks, the shovels, selling those, enabling folks to go out and gold mine. Or even Wells Fargo, who was providing security and transport for that gold. And so this was actually the ecosystem around the gold rush. And I'm seeing the same thing for artificial intelligence today. And we truly believe that revolutions require an ecosystem, and it just doesn't happen at a single organization. And so one of the opportunities that I see today is really around data is a big piece. Where's the new value created when all these foundational models are training on the same data, which is the World Wide Web? At some point, they're all going to converge to the same quality, accuracy, and in my opinion, will be somewhat commoditized. And so where's the value created? I think in data acquisition. I think for folks that have given use cases or have data that they've gathered throughout the years, a lot of this will create the new value. And what you can see here is Tesla with their cars, they had cameras. Real humans were driving them, but they were able to gather a lot of driving data to train their autonomous cars. And maybe my theory will be proven here in 10 years, whether that actually gave them a competitive advantage or not. But for a lot of organizations, this actually just provides a direct data monetization effort where you've got a lot of folks trying to build AI initiatives. They're coming in saying, hey, we'll deliver all this value, but give us your data. Well, for most folks, they're not just going to give up their data, and I think there's going to be a lot of paid partnerships, data monetization efforts where data becomes one of the valuable things here and really doesn't have anything to do with using AI at all. And then outside of collecting and acquiring data, there's a whole new data stack that's happened. So a lot of folks have built modern, let's say the modern data stack, cloud-based analytics, really for structured and semi-structured data. This is just one element of what's enabling the AI future. There's a whole new data stack targeted towards ETL pipelines for unstructured data that is needed. And a lot of this opportunity is coming from the partners in the room. Outside of that, I won't talk too much. Infrastructure is needed. It's funny, I've given this presentation at another conference, and they're like, well, the gold rush is really NVIDIA. Well, NVIDIA has really skyrocketed, but they're just one example from the infrastructure perspective. Security, I think security is a foundation for a lot of folks. One of the things that I didn't put on here, but what we found in our yearly study is because the low maturity, most folks are focused on foundational elements today, which is how do we set up the guardrails to actually enable AI in our environment? And so do we have the right data security in place? Do we have the right prevention of data going into these large language models? Do we have secure environments? And so security is actually going to be the enabler of AI in most organizations because we need to shift from this allow block, what we saw when ChatGPT first came out is no one's allowed to use this. No one's allowed to get productivity gains. But we need to shift to, hey, let's get those productivity gains, but do that in a secure fashion. And so we're seeing a lot of that come to fruition today from whether you're developing AI models or you're just leveraging generative AI apps within your organization. And then the other big piece is talent. So the three biggest challenges that we've seen from AI deployment standpoint is, first and foremost, our people aren't even ready to adopt AI yet. So lack of in-house expertise is that number one challenge. And for me, this isn't, do you have a data scientist on staff? I think that's part of it. Do you have the technical talent to deploy and build these tools? But are you enabling your business users as well? If you think about this Gen AI revolution, there's a lot of HR applications for automated reviewing and screening. There's sales applications, and there's so much on the business side. But are business users even enabled to use these technologies yet? I mean, how much business still happens out of Excel today because we can't get them to adopt SaaS applications? It's just the reality that we live in today. And then beyond that, we see just unproven ROI. How do you prove return on investment based off the projects that you're proposing? And then the lack of data. It's always about the data. Do you have the right foundations to even make this work? And so moving on to how do we get started? How do we even talk about AI in our organizations? From what we're seeing is we really need to shift the conversation. We have a lot of boards that we hear about that are pushing AI initiatives from top down, asking CEOs and CIOs and CTOs, hey, what are we doing about AI? How do we implement AI? How do we do this? And we really got to shift the conversation of how and what to why are we doing this? So rather than, hey, do we have the right technical staff? Do we have the right infrastructure? Do we have our data ready? To why are we going to do this in the first place? What's the value that's going to be gained? And then once you figure out the use cases, the why, the value proposition to the organization, then you can start to think about how you're going to accomplish it. But you don't want to spend all this time and effort for just that 95% fail rate, right? And so it's really critical to understand that. And I think the good way of doing this is really just showing simple ROI metrics. And so this is an example of what we've shown from a soft cost metric for some folks that we've worked with. For a simple use case, which is just searching for knowledge within your organization. This could be corporate policies, this could be documents, this could be one-pagers to send to your customers. This could be really anything. And what we find is there's a lot of time and effort spent in just finding things in an organization. And then leveraging generative AI, you can reduce the amount of time folks are searching, which reduces a cost of about $8,000 per employee. So you get a huge productivity savings. And bringing that to the board is way more impactful than just saying, hey, we're doing AI for knowledge management. You have concrete evidence of how it's actually benefiting organizations. And if we look at some of the trends and themes that we're seeing, probably the biggest buzzword that I've been hearing this year is agentic AI. I don't think we're anywhere close to agentic AI, but I'd like to describe kind of where we're at and why it's important. We started out with RPA, robotic process automation. This is really good for deterministic workflows that you need to run the same every time in the exact same way with low inaccuracy, no errors. And then we've moved to generative AI, which is a little bit of automation, but it's just, hey, generate something that I've requested. And we're moving into agentic, which is, hey, I provide an AI system with what I want accomplished, and they can figure out how to do that, what the process looks like, and goes and accomplishes it. So we've really shifted from deterministic to probabilistic. And I don't think this is an evolution. I think there's room for both. I think organizations are going to still leverage rule-based automation scripts, but also have probabilistic automation as well. And so if you look at this is very closely related to autonomous cars and where we're at in terms of maturity of level 1 automation. This is really just software, rule-based automation, RPA, script-type automation, generative AI. But at some point, we may see in the future where you have actual business units that are being run entirely by non-human workers. So you may have a sales team, but your account executives are AI, your business development representatives are AI, and they all have to interact together to accomplish generating more revenue. And that's kind of scary, to be honest, but I think we're a long way out from what that looks like. And so if we look at more practical view of what this looks like, today, level 1 LLM, this is generate a response to my question. Where you're seeing more value for organization is don't just generate a response, but understand context from my organization. So the level 2 agentic AI is how do I connect my own data sources to AI? Things like Gemini or Copilot are good examples of this. How do you get context of my organization? So if I am a sales rep, what type of products would be best for this customer? Is this going to solve my customer's challenges? What does the pricing look like? That get a little more context around the automation. And then that level 3 is really that autonomous organization where, to me, when I look at AI, it's almost like the new type of application. And these individual BDR account execs, these are the microservices that we're building. And that's what the level 3 kind of orchestration looks like. And just to kind of give an example of the power of this, we work with a farming organization, and they had a backlog of applications. And they really needed to build this biosecurity planner checklist for visitors at their farm, and they just didn't have time to build it. And so our AI lead director, he was able to build up a mock-up leveraging agentic AI. And what you're seeing on the screen right now was actually generated with one simple line in text, and it worked from day one. And what's interesting is, I'll show you the prompt, is he didn't even spell things correctly. He didn't spell farms correctly. He didn't even say biosecurity. He said bioscience. And somehow the agentic AI was able to build a prototype for this farm in roughly 10 minutes, which is crazy. This is all going back to how fast innovation is really accelerating. And so we are going to be in a future where this is very impactful, and you're going to have these more agentic AI use cases. But what we're seeing today are very, I would say, low-hanging fruit, easy value, easy to deploy. How do you prove AI trust in your organization? So a lot of things that we talk about is don't try and go after the huge competitive radical innovations. How do you do the fix-its, the incremental innovations, leveraging AI? And so I'm going to highlight just some of the example use cases that we're seeing today. One is really just extracting data out of documents and the incredible advancements in OCR technologies, where a lot of folks have paper documents, they have PDFs, they have all kinds of unstructured data that they're actually not able to leverage today. And if you think about some of the statistics out there, unstructured data is probably where most of our data is being generated, and we're not finding value. But AI is unlocking that for a lot of organizations. The other use case I talked about was sales ops. I don't think they're actually going to be account reps. That one was maybe a bit of a stretch. I don't think we're going to have AI folks going out to the golf courses, golfing with robots or anything like that. But what they are doing is making much more personalized connections, finding the right prospects, finding the right conversations, creating the right emails to really make sure that you're not wasting the prospect time and you're not wasting your time, and you're finding genuine meetings, and they're doing it in an autonomous way. And so they're going out, they're doing the prospecting research, they're finding the contacts, setting up the email, and really making sure it's high impact. I talked about the security use case. We're seeing what I would call the cloud access security brokers for artificial intelligence come to market, where we're shifting from that allow block model to allowing our users to use generative AI in a secure way. And really, this is providing things like auditability. It's providing things like data redaction and data security principles, and then also preventing folks from really using unsanctioned apps that aren't really provided. So maybe you don't even want to use certain ones, and you have a list of sanctioned apps that you want to use. This is really where I'm seeing these new Gen AI CASBs come to market to enable organizations to find the benefit from AI without having a security as their biggest concern. And one of the cool use cases about the auditability piece as well is they're actually finding those innovative use cases through that. So they release the generative AI CASB into the environment. They're seeing what are folks even using it for, how are they getting productivity, and how do we formalize that? Maybe people are analyzing resumes for hiring. Well, let's actually just have a dedicated tool or automation to do that rather than folks having one-off prompts. And that's just kind of a tangential use case to that. We talked about the scheduling. I don't know how many times I've been stood up on a one-on-one or a sync, and no one was there to make it, and then we have to spend a whole bunch of time figuring out when we're going to get that sync back on the calendar. And it really does waste a lot of time. And so even a use case such as meeting management, automating meetings for folks, automating focus time based off project management systems can save organizations $8,000 per user. The other big one that we're seeing is just simplified ITSM. So IT service management, being able to upgrade your laptop, get access to applications. I've been there at a new organization where I get there day one, I get my laptop, but I don't have any of the applications to really get started working on anything. I don't have my Salesforce access, I don't have the access. And these apps are really enabling organizations to get the application provisioning, password resets, all those low-hanging fruits, enabling your IT team to work on more high-value ticketing opportunities. And this really does this in a human-in-the-loop way. So you still have approvals and things like that. And just a little teaser at the end. I don't want to be too salesy at the end, but how does Innovation Ventures actually help with all of this? What do we do? I told you we're all about innovation. Innovation Ventures is a company that's trying to provide innovation a path to success. So how do we give you those successful innovation initiatives? And we really do this through a huge network of an ecosystem. So we work with the investors, their entrepreneurs, and their products that they're building, all the way down to that network of 1750 plus global CIO technology executives. For artificial intelligence specifically, we really have an approach of, hey, let us help come build a strategy. We saw that most folks are in the planning stage. What do we even do? How do we even get value out of artificial intelligence? Well, we have a 4-phase approach, which is let's build a strategy. Let's identify where you're at with AI today, almost like an AI readiness assessment. We understand your business. We go do stakeholder interviews to understand where there's opportunities, where those problems, starting with that why that I talked about earlier. So we start with that why, we build that document, we identify use cases, and then we prioritize them based off business impact, and then we help try and provide a proof of concept to show that that value actually can be achieved. If we think about the innovation, technology change, radical change, we're really focused on that incremental innovation at first, building trust in your organization, trusting AI, and then we help you scale to some more of those competitive plays. And this is really just showing you how we do that. We meet with your business stakeholders, we understand your strategy, and we start to prioritize based off what we learn. We also give you a good idea of where you're at today and where there could be improvements. And so part of this is your strategy, part of this is what kind of infrastructure do you have in place, what data do you have in place today, what kind of security and compliance concerns does your organization have. Really gives you a starting block, especially for folks that are pitching to the board where it's like, this is where we're at today and this is where we're focused on going. You can kind of have a litmus test of how well your organization is doing. And so we help from not just a strategy, but through execution, through HiPoCON networks. And we have done this for a lot of various sizing customers. So we've done large enterprise customers, and we've also done maybe teams of 10. And so we really go across the board and really helping folks in their AI journeys and really giving them a path to success there. And so that's what I had prepared for everyone today. Really appreciate the time. If you want to talk more AI or innovation, we're in that corner booth over there. But once again, thank you, HiPoCON Networks. Thanks to everyone that was involved in this. Really appreciate it. Really blessed to be a part of this event. Thank you.